a USB stick in her laptop, nearly knocking over her coffee. Her hand still trembled as they walked down the corridor together, her in worn sneakers and a hoodie with her daughter's handprints on the sleeve, him in his signature black jacket and unhurried stride. People stared. Whispers buzzed like static behind frosted glass walls. No one had ever seen Elon Musk walk side by side with a mid-level engineer from the software QA team. No one. At the elevator, she hesitated. "Elon," she asked softly, "can I ask you something?" He looked at her, genuinely curious. "Sure. If the calendar had really glitched, how did you end up in my lab?" There was a pause. His eyes flicked to the floor, then back to her. "I don't know," he said. "I just felt like turning left instead of right." Nina smiled faintly. For the first time in months, something in her chest loosened. By noon, the senior technical team had heard her pitch. By evening, her inbox was filled with meeting requests. And by Friday, Elon had added her module to the next testing cycle under a new initiative, real-time empathy integration. The company didn't know what that meant yet. But they would. Because somewhere between a faulty calendar and a broken spirit, something rare had happened. Someone in power had paused long enough to see what wasn't being shown. And Nina? She wasn't just coding anymore. She was being seen. You can't change the world if you can't even catch your breath. 3 days later, Nina still wasn't sure if it had really happened. One moment she was writing bug reports and juggling daycare drop-offs, and the next she was standing in a glass conference room on the 5th floor, the one they called the Skydeck, because that's how far away it felt from people like her. But she hadn't been alone. A few feet away stood Malcolm Reese, a veteran mechanical engineer who had been at Tesla since the Roadster prototype. He was graying at the temples, carried a limp from an old accident, and had a laugh like crushed gravel. People respected him. People also avoided him. Malcolm never suffered fools. Or meetings. Which made it even stranger when he, too, had been pulled into the room by Elon Musk without any real explanation. "I thought you were here to fix my server," Malcolm had muttered when they first met. Didn't expect to be revolutionizing software culture with a QA wizard and a billionaire. Nina chuckled nervously. Elon walked in carrying 2 cans of sparkling water and a third for himself. He slid one to each of them and leaned against the window, arms crossed. "We're building something new," he said simply. "But this time, it's not a product." They both waited. He didn't elaborate right away. Instead, he walked to a digital screen and pulled up a chart, one Nina had never seen before. It wasn't about cars. It wasn't about revenue. It was about burnout. "I've seen too many brilliant people break," Elon said, his voice low. "And the worst part? No one stopped them. Including me." Malcolm raised an eyebrow. "You mean recently?" "No," Elon replied. "I mean 15 years ago. There was a guy I worked with at PayPal, Eddie. Coded like a machine. Built the backbone of half our payment infrastructure." He paused. "We found him in the office one morning. Heart attack. 38. The room went quiet. "I didn't say anything," Elon continued. "Not publicly. Not then. I kept working. Thought that was what he would have wanted." Nina swallowed. "But I think," Elon said, turning to them, "it's time I stop pretending that brilliance without boundaries is something to be proud of." He pulled up a second screen, this one showing logs, emails, and timestamps from employees. Overwork patterns. Missed logouts. Increased errors past 1 a.m. "I want to change the way we work," he said. "I need help doing it." Nina stared at him. "Me? You see what others miss. And you care about systems that actually protect people, not just cars." Malcolm snorted. "And I've been saying the same damn thing for years, no one listens." "They will now," Elon said. "We're calling it Project Pulse." He walked over to a small touchpad and tapped it. A logo appeared, a simple heart made of lines and code. Your job, he said to Nina, is to design a way for teams to understand their own limits before they collapse. He turned to Malcolm. And yours is to make sure no one dismisses it as fluff. Malcolm cracked a dry smile. So you're building empathy into software? Not just software, Elon said. Into culture. Nina's mind raced. She had ideas. She'd been thinking about this for months, about how the system could flag when someone was operating under chronic sleep deprivation or when code quality dropped after 12-hour stretches. About how tech teams needed more than deadlines, they needed checkpoints for emotional bandwidth. I want to start with transparency, she said quietly. A real-time dashboard. One that shows not just project milestones, but human strain indicators. Hours logged. Energy dips. Even anonymous stress markers. Like a Fitbit for work culture, Malcolm added. Exactly. Elon nodded. Build it. They did. Over the next 2 weeks, Nina barely left her desk. But this time, she wasn't just chasing bugs, she was creating a system that would alert managers when burnout risks were rising. It wasn't invasive. It didn't name names. But it gave a pulse, just enough for people to be seeing before they unraveled. And then came the real test. One Friday afternoon, a quiet junior developer named Priya passed out in the cafeteria. Nothing dramatic, just fainted during lunch. Dehydration, exhaustion. She'd been working 3 straight weeks to hit a release deadline. No one noticed. Until her collapse. Nina's system caught it a week earlier. She had submitted a flag to the department head. It had been ignored. Now it was front-page internal news. Elon sent a company-wide message that evening. It was only 3 lines. We don't sacrifice people for progress. If the cost of innovation is health, it's too high. Permission to breathe, granted. The next day, signs went up in the offices, recharge rooms, open 24/7. Not nap pods. Not meditation apps. Just quiet rooms, with plants, music, and space. For thinking. For stopping. Some employees laughed. Others shrugged. But most, quietly, tentatively, entered. And stayed. Later that month, Elon held a live-stream Q&A with Nina and Malcolm beside him. When asked what the biggest innovation of the year was, Elon said something no one expected. It's not a feature. It's a feeling. The feeling that you're allowed to be human here. And for Nina, the woman who once sat alone in a diagnostics bay, coding in silence while doubting her worth, this was the loudest she had ever felt. They said burnout was part of greatness. Turns out, they were wrong. It happened on a Monday morning. A name flashed across the company's internal emergency alert system. Jordan Lee, a systems architect from the Nevada Gigafactory, had suffered a seizure in the middle of a design meeting. He was 34. No prior conditions. But he'd been pulling 18-hour days, sleeping in his car, missing meals. All for a production sprint. By lunchtime, the story had spread like wildfire. By evening, a photo of Jordan on a stretcher outside the Tesla campus parking garage had gone viral on Reddit. The backlash was swift and brutal. News headlines didn't hold back. Another Tesla engineer collapses. Is the culture broken? Innovation at what cost? How Elon Musk's empire is burning out its brains. In a company once praised for its speed, the world had finally started to ask what it was speeding toward. Elon didn't call a board meeting. He didn't post a thread on X. He did something else. He called Nina Torres into his office. No PR team. No handlers. Just Elon. And her. I failed him, Elon said quietly, staring out the floor-to-ceiling window. Jordan. I knew his name. We even talked once, at a product demo. He told me he was proud to work here. I didn't see how much it was costing him. Nina sat across from him. Her palms were sweaty. Her throat dry. This was different. This wasn't the visionary. This was the man behind the mission, wounded by it. "We can't undo what happened," she said, gently. "But we can decide what happens next." That day, they launched Recharge Right, a company-wide directive mandating mandatory rest periods, capped daily hours, and opt-in recovery leaves. It wasn't perfect. Some teams grumbled. Others found loopholes. But something shifted. The message was no longer optional. Rest wasn't weakness. It was wisdom. Still, resistance crept in. At the Tuesday leadership sync, Brenda Whitmore, Tesla's VP of Ops for North America, slammed her notebook on the table. "We can't build rockets with yoga mats," she snapped. Elon stared at her for a long beat. Then replied, "No one builds rockets with broken people either." Brenda didn't respond. But she didn't speak again for the rest of the meeting. Later that week, Malcolm Reese stood in front of a room of senior engineers, pointing to a dashboard that had once tracked only delivery timelines. Now, next to it, were real-time burnout risk metrics, sleep averages, energy feedback, turnover flags. "Look," Malcolm said, circling a red indicator. "This is where performance dropped. Not because we lacked skill, but because we ignored reality." In the back of the room, Nina watched them shift in their seats. Some leaned forward. Others looked away. But none of them laughed anymore. That night, as Nina prepared for bed, her daughter, Lila, now 8, climbed in beside her. "Did you fix the cars today, Mommy?" Nina smiled. "No, baby. Not today." "What did you fix?" She paused. A heartbeat. Lila didn't understand. Not yet. But one day, she would. A week later, an anonymous email went out on Tesla's internal server. A short message. No signature. "I took a break today. For the first time in 6 months. And I didn't feel guilty. Thank you for reminding us we're not machines." The message was forwarded over 100 times. People printed it, pinned it, framed it, and the line between work and well-being began to blur in the best way. Not everyone was thrilled. Some executives, old-school types, called it a distraction. Productivity hawks whispered that the new culture was soft. But the data disagreed. Bugs were down. Retention was up. Creative problem-solving surged. One manager, once skeptical, admitted during a Pulse review, "We had 3 engineers solve a 6-week bottleneck in 4 days. After a walk. I don't know what to believe anymore." The human brain, it turned out, worked better when it wasn't in survival mode. Who knew? Then came a bigger surprise. At the end of the quarter, Elon invited Nina to co-host Tesla's Internal Leadership Summit, a meeting typically reserved for C-levels and VPs. She almost declined. "I'm not an executive," she told him. "No," Elon said. "You're something rarer." She stood before the audience, hands trembling, voice shaking slightly. But as she looked across the room, at engineers and managers and interns who had all, in some way, begun breathing again, she knew exactly what to say. "This isn't a pause in the mission," she began. "This is the mission. Because you can't build the future if you've burned out the people meant to live in it." The room fell silent. Then, applause. Genuine. Long-standing. It wasn't about her. Not really. It was about all of them. The ones who had been running too fast, for too long, afraid to ask if it was okay to stop. Now, they had permission. Not from a policy, but from each other. You don't always leave a legacy by being the loudest voice in the room. Sometimes, it's by being the first one to stop and listen. A year had passed. The dashboard Nina had once dreamed up on a coffee-stained notepad now sat on the homepage of every Tesla employee's internal portal. Pulseboard, a living, breathing ecosystem of data and empathy, wasn't just a tool anymore. It was a compass. It showed how people felt, how they worked, where they struggled, and most importantly, that they mattered. Tesla's retention numbers had improved by 19%. Product delays had dropped. Error rates, particularly during crunch cycles, fell sharply. But numbers weren't what Nina remembered most. It was the little things. The junior intern who had once been too scared to request time off, now proudly posting vacation pictures with the hashtag #RechargeRight. The single mom in Fremont who messaged her anonymously, "I made it to my son's piano recital. First one in 2 years. Thanks for making that possible." Or the line manager in Buffalo who used the new flexible schedule to care for his father in hospice and didn't lose his job for it. And then there was Lila, now 9. She no longer asked her mom if she fixed the cars. Now she asked, "Did you help someone breathe today?" That was the legacy Nina never expected to leave. It was a late spring afternoon when Elon called her into his office again. No formal agenda. No press. Just him, a pair of mugs, and a view of the sun dipping behind the factory rooftops. "You turned this place upside down," he said, handing her a warm cup of chai. "I just asked people to rest. That's not a small thing in a world built on urgency." He leaned forward, his tone softer than usual. "Can I tell you something I've never said out loud?" Nina nodded. "There was a moment, years ago, before SpaceX even got off the ground, when I thought about quitting." She blinked. "You?" "I wasn't sleeping. Barely eating. Everyone thought I was a machine. I played into it. Until one night I sat in my car, outside the office, and I couldn't move. I just sat there. For 2 hours." He paused. "And I realized, if I die, they'll say I worked hard. But they won't say I lived well." Nina looked down at her mug. "I think a lot of us feel that," she whispered. "But no one wants to say it out loud." "Well," Elon said, "you said it. You built it. You changed it." He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a thin hardback book. A prototype. On the cover, "Brilliance with Balance." "I'm publishing this next quarter," he said. "It's not a technical guide. It's about what we've learned here. And I'd like you to write the foreword." Nina stared at him, stunned. "You don't have to say yes right away," he added. "But I think your voice is the one people will believe." That weekend, Nina skipped the TED Talk invite from San Francisco. She skipped the Forbes panel, too. Instead, she attended Lila's school play, front row. After the show, Lila ran into her arms, still in her paper astronaut costume. "Did you like it, Mom?" "I loved it." Lila grinned. "One day, I'm gonna work at Tesla too." Nina kissed her forehead. "I hope by then, it's a place where you can be brilliant and be whole." And she meant it. The following month, Tesla quietly added a new line to its employee onboarding handbook. "We innovate boldly. But we breathe intentionally. Because this company is not just powered by code, or wires, or wheels. It's powered by people." Some stories don't end with applause. They end with a deeper breath, a lighter step, and the quiet realization that change didn't come from titles or corner offices. It came from someone daring to ask a simple question: what if rest isn't weakness? What if slowing down isn't the enemy of greatness, but the very thing that makes it sustainable? In a world addicted to urgency, it turns out that true power begins with the courage to pause. Not just for yourself, but for the people who look to you for permission to do the same. If this story stirred something in you, if it made you breathe differently, or think twice about how you've been carrying the weight of your ambition, don't let that moment pass. Share this story with someone who's been running on empty. Give them the reminder they may not know they need, that they are not a machine, and they were never meant to be. Pick up one of the books below, read just a chapter, and let it sit with you. Because sometimes, a story doesn't change everything. But it can change the next breath. And that's more than enough.